Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another month. It's February, I think.
It is.
I'm pretty sure. I'm in denial about it. But...
I'm practically positive it's February.
Oh, fine. My computer says it is. We have our guest for this month, and we're going to let Kameron introduce herself. Go ahead, Kameron.
Hi. Sorry, I'm keeping myself on mute when I'm not talking, so that way there's no background noise.
Good.
Hi, I'm Kameron Claire. That's me.
You're right.
I write romance, mostly contemporary, insta-love, and this year I'll be putting out paranormal, starting with shifters.
Fun.
Nice.
Okay.
Huh.
Yeah, you've got a lot of stuff going on. You do a lot of packages with people, or bundles, really. No packages. Bundles with people. How did you get started on all that?
Yeah. In 2021, when I started writing Insta-Love, I met an entire community online that's grown like by leaps and bounds. I think I was like somewhere within the first 300, and now there's like a couple thousand or whatever. We just did a Insta-Love University and everything where we taught classes and everything. So I have a couple classes in there, one of which happens to be about collaborations. So, because I'm, my background's project management. So of course I had to like engineer the crap out of how to do a collaboration because I have control issues apparently.
No.
But
welcome to the club.
Yeah. Big surprise. But yeah, so in 2021, I started in collaborations. I did a lot of them in 2022. I didn't do any in 2023. And then this year I'll be in a couple of them. So it was kind of like, I was in a lot of them for a while there, but 2023 was mostly about me rebranding some of the titles that I had done and then creating a bunch of series. So I have a football series and I'm getting ready to put out the 8th and last book in a veteran canine series. So all of my guys are veteran canine trainers.
Yeah, series are big, important, all that good stuff in the writing world.
For read through.
Yes.
I have a question for you. What is Insta-Love?
Insta-Love literally is just, it's like fated mates. So it's just literally like one or both know pretty much immediately. This is the one for me. You don't have this 6-month long courtship and all that crap. Like
so
within their first,
I have a question. Is it Insta-Love or Insta-Lust?
Both. It can be both. There's actually Insta-Love that is non-steamy closed door. So while there may be lust there is nothing on page. And then there's, of course, obviously Insta lust that turns into Insta love. So both.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's like a really quick way to say love at first sight.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually one of them. And for me, it's almost always the male is the one that's very much like, yep, that's the one I want. And she usually has some reason to be like, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see.
I just had a conversation with someone about asking me, did I believe in love at first sight? And how do you know when someone is the one? And I had to say, because I'm honest like that, I had to say, I don't believe in love at first sight, although I do believe in lust at first sight. And I also don't believe there's only one.
I mean, in reality, I'm extremely jaded. So I find actually I write romance extremely ironic. But I actually do believe in love at first sight. But I also don't believe that there's only one. Like, I think you can have many loves. I think that we all mature in age and go through life changes, and not everybody's going to mature in age and go through life changes with you in the same way and come out with the same, lessons learned and stuff. So, I think that it's very natural that people probably grow apart, and then it becomes a discussion of how much are you willing to, fight to keep it together long term. Those of you that have been married for 20, 30, 40 years, you know that it hasn't been easy the entire time. There's times where you have to fight for the relationship. So
This is true. Going on 30 years and we're religiously, or we're not, but we are religiously at different ends of that spectrum too, but also politically. So, it is work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I think that anybody who sits there and says that it's not natural, for people to change over time and potentially grow apart. Yeah, I mean, how can you not? You both have the same situation happen, and then you like the chances of you coming out. I mean, one of you is going to be, what is that, an automaton? If you're like everything that your spouse, you're like, yes, I agree completely. Yeah, no, you don't. You just don't think that's the thing.
We live in Colorado Springs. We've seen those.
Yes, we have.
We won't go into that one though.
Right?
Don't want to offend people, but yeah. So
but we will.
And the thing is, though, even before you get in a relationship, you're coming from different backgrounds. You're measuring everything with a different stick to begin with.
Right.
So that's not going to change. Everything you experience together, you're still going to go off in those different directions. So, but it would probably be boring as fuck to agree with everything.
I can't even imagine. I'm like, yeah, it would be boring.
Yeah, our relationship's not boring here. So,
yeah, I mean, it seems to me that part of the challenge is to find somebody that you can respectfully disagree with and be okay with that. Right?
Yeah.
That's true. So, moving to true crime stuff, you've met somebody that we covered in one of our past episodes. So who was that?
I went to high school with Jonathan Duty. He was in my grade. Like I was there the day that it all like everybody was arrested. Like the entire school got put on lockdown because the camera crews were outside in the parking lot. Like, yeah.
And I didn't
me and 1,000 other students,
Right. And just to remind people, he's the one who shot up the what was it? Like a Buddhist temple or yeah. So
it's actually the largest, I don't know if it still is today, but at the time in 1991, it was the largest mass murder in Arizona history as far as like that kind of crime,
Right.
We won't go over there, but
like genocide or anything like that.
Yeah. Committed by I believe at the time when it happened, they were 16 and 14.
Okay.
Year old.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, he was a military kid. So he was, him and I both worked on base. He worked at the commissary. I worked at AFES. Like I worked at, anybody who's military would know, like Anthony's Pizza and Red Robin Hood sandwiches, like outside the BX. Like that's where I worked. He worked at the commissary. I mean, he was, I can't really say what he was because obviously I didn't know.
I know that's the problem afterwards, right? Like just once, I want somebody to ask me about somebody who commits crime and just be like, he was a fucking asshole. I knew he was going to kill somebody someday.
Yeah.
Because nobody ever says that.
He was quiet, mild-mannered, and kept to himself.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeffrey Dahmer was a great guy, wasn't he? I mean,
right. Super nice.
Totally invited people into his house, no problem.
Helping people with suicide, being on that line. Great guy. So yeah. It's just as Pete would hate for me to say, sometimes they just snap.
Yeah, there are a lot of us that just snap. I mean, a lot of them who just
Yeah, I know. I think I've been on that edge a few times. Like, I would just love to take everybody out just right now. There's been moments too recently where I've been like, is the American Indian movement still going? I'm going to go join AIM. I've had enough.
I'm surprised more menopausal women haven't snapped and gone down in flames.
My favorite my favorite menopausal story is I had this friend, I think she's about 10 years older than me. And she was driving to Denver one day. And I think she was going to the airport to pick somebody up. She called me from the side of I-25. And I was like, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, I just got into an accident. And I was like, what? She was like, okay, so he'll come to cussing. She's like, some bitch cut me off and I just said, fuck it. And I rammed her. She's like, my meds are overdue. I need my hormones. I was just done. And I was like,
that was her Tawanda moment.
I was going to say, it's very fried green tomatoes.
yeah, I was like, so that's what the future holds for me. Right on. Like, make sure I have the right car when that happens.
I mean, that's the problem, is that I would I would be lying if I said I haven't come close to that shit already. And I would also be lying if I said I haven't followed somebody home who I've had a car incident with. And I was doing that in my 20s. So everybody should be really scared that I'm in perimenopause right now.
There's a reason why you don't actually concealed carry in your car, right? Because like you have to know your limitations of like
exactly. Like I might shoot a bitch. So
is it probable that I'm going to do that? No, but is it completely without possibility? No. So remove temptation.
You could carry a paintball gun.
I could.
I think that would be equally satisfying.
But that's still still legal trouble. So no.
my ex, when we rode motorcycles, he used to carry like I don't even know, like 1/2-inch diameter ball bearings.
Mm-hmm.
Solid metal ball bearings. And if somebody was like tailing or whatever, he would just tink and just drop them because they hit the ground and then and if they get underneath of your car, God knows what they're going to put in there. If they bounce up, like, I don't know that he ever did actually dropped one, but he used to always have a pocket of them.
But he had the satisfaction of having it in there just in case.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Because the problem is then it could hit anybody else too, not just the person that's pissing you off, right? But yeah, I've joked about making my car like Mad Max. Mad Maxing the hell out of my Jeep and just going for it. Like, armor that bitch. I already have the big grill on the front, so
can I ride shotgun when
you
do?
You could have the mister literally put like a little a sliding ramp rail from the middle console all the way back to the right back behind your bumper, and then you could just do that ball peen hammer thing, or ball bearing thing.
Yeah.
Slide out. Ding.
Get something that sprays like ink onto their windshield from the back of the car.
Does this mean you won't let me throw a bowling ball?
Man, again, I've already said I was on the bus when some kid threw an orange out and shattered the windshield behind us on Highway 24 in high school. Oh no, that was middle school, because I remember what teacher that was. She's published now. So that was ugly. He tried to take that kid out. His name was Danny. So... And of course, we as kids had no idea an orange could do that kind of damage thrown out of a car. Like, it was a stupid fucking thing to do no matter what. But certainly he didn't throw it out thinking it would shatter a windshield and like cut the woman who was in the passenger seat, so that the husband, instead of taking care of her, I've always been annoyed by that thing where it's like fight and don't take, like, I'm going to go take this kid out instead of I'm going to take care of my wife until, say, an ambulance gets here. My bleeding wife. Yes. No, he was intent on killing a teenager instead.
Well, how many times do you see people getting mauled by a bear or a deer and their spouse or their friend is recording it? Yeah, I'll help you in a minute.
This is just good, clean fun. Well, half the videos on America's Funniest Home Videos were kids doing something that almost killed them, and the parents were like, as they filmed it. I was always like, maybe help that one. That almost went really wrong.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of Jeff's coworkers, he got one of his videos on there one time, and they won like the first round or whatever, and then went to whatever the end of season was where they did it, and he didn't like win the big one, but we sent in a video and never heard back.
Is it still on?
I don't know. This was back when it was.
Now everything's on TikTok or it's on Facebook.
Bob Saget's dead, so I haven't.
Well, he got replaced.
Yeah, they replaced him.
Is it Brady?
Oh yeah, didn't he do it for a while?
Maybe.
Well, wait. Alfonso, didn't Ribeiro take over for a while?
Yeah,
I don't know. But anyway, yeah, we never heard back on ours, and we thought it was hysterical, but it wasn't a child in danger, so I guess it wasn't good enough. It was the one of my daughter doing the skydiving thing where they're indoors. And she's so hyper flexible that her limbs were like flapping like one of those noodle people.
I saw this. It is hilarious.
Never heard back. I was like, really? You have to actually endanger your children to get on there. That's what we learned. All right.
Or hit a guy in the nuts.
Yeah, pretty much. Those ones always got on. I was like, really? These aren't even funny.
They aren't even inventive. It's just.
I always hated the ones where elderly people fell, though. I was like, that's not funny. They probably are bleeding internally now.
Let me just tell you, that gets less funny the older you get.
Right? Well, now that my mom's falling and breaking shit constantly, like once a month, something new. No. Right? I'm like, that's really not funny, but I never found it funny. So it was like, I can laugh at all kinds of dark things, but I will not laugh at an elderly person having some terrible fall.
No, I don't like the stuff I don't like the little reels and the TikToks of people where it looks like they could be seriously injured. I mean, the belly flop into the lake, fine, but people who like flip and land on their neck, and I'm just like, some of it looks really painful and awful.
Right. And I'm like, that wasn't funny.
No.
Okay.
But, part of that is a factor of age, right? Because like we did a bunch of stupid stuff when we were 18 that thank God there were not video cameras for. And now we are like, oh yeah, that neck and shoulder pain I've had for the last 10 years. It was because I was throwing myself into a mosh pit at 15, 16. No concept of the fact that 20 years later, I'm going to pay for that. So they're just, they don't know yet. They don't know.
No, they don't.
They do not.
Although, like, speaking of which, every time kids do something stupid online, and I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't have a phone with a camera on it when I was in high school or no. I feel like I was caught on regular cameras doing quite a few things sometimes. So
I feel like we were born and raised during the perfect time, right? Just enough technology for stuff to be cool and awesome, but not so much that there's a record of any of it. Like, I think we were at the perfect, like that perfect sliver of time.
Right? Everybody after us was screwed. Right. But I think that also means that they have to grow up being cognizant of being on camera more often, though. So
you would hope so.
You would, right.
But it seems like some of them are not conscientious of the fact that everybody has a camera.
No, well, the immortality of teens, right? Like, this will never bite me in the ass. So guess what?
It won't kill me, and it won't bite me in the ass.
Right.
And my parents will never see it.
Right.
At some point, it won't matter. I mean, considering the presidents we've had, it pretty much should not matter what you get caught doing as a teenager now.
No, apparently it can lift you pretty high. So
yeah.
Well, so some girls at my kids' school, my son doesn't go there anymore though, created a burn book from Mean Girls.
Oh,
nice. A real one. Yeah. And I haven't heard any updates because my daughter didn't know anything about it. The one that's still there. My son knows about it because one of his friends who graduated with him last year, her little brother was in it.
Oh.
And it was bad. It was bad, false accusation, bad.
Oh.
It was rapey related.
Ooh.
Not full rape, but and I was like, the thing is, he had proof that none of it was true for what they put out there, but it doesn't matter because there will be people who will believe it no matter what. Mm-hmm. So this kid is just screwed and he's got another year ahead of him. After this one.
Poor guy.
So yeah, this is ugly. And I'm like,
all you could do is hope that the girls get theirs in a very relatively soon time frame so that way they learn from it and like
instead of it ruining
better people in their future.
Yeah. I was just like the absolute stupidity of watching Mean Girls and thinking this is a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Like tell me that you don't learn. Right there. All right. So you're ready to start.
I can start. Because everybody loves a cult. So I'm going to talk about the cult that you may or may not know is a cult.
I know I see the advertisements all the time and I'm like, eek.
So Cameron, have you seen the advertisements for Shen Yun? The ancient Chinese dance?
No.
Oh my God.
At the World Arena or they're coming to the World Arena again?
The Pikes Peak Center.
How do you spell it?
SHEN, separate word, YUN. God, don't Google it. Don't Google it. Because if you Google it, you will have Shen Yun shit all over your computer for weeks.
Okay, I'm hitting end. Go ahead, tell me all about this cult.
But I mean, it's on the radio, it's on the TV. They have the wrapper on the Sunday paper, and it's just. And in cities where there is an actual functioning public transportation system, it's plastered with posters, like the subway stops, the subway stations, the train stations. There's posters everywhere. It's everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. So from the website, and this is how I know don't go to the website, because every other thing I get now is, would you like to go see? Would you like tickets for Shen Yun? No, I do not. Shen Yun invites you to travel back to the magical world of ancient China. Experience a lost culture through the incredible art of classical Chinese dance and see legends come to life. Shen Yun makes this possible by pushing the boundaries of the performing arts with a unique blend of stunning costuming, high-tech backdrops, and an orchestra like no other. Be prepared for a theatrical experience that will take your breath away.
I'm just going to say, I'm going to laugh later because we're using my laptop and my tech house with my phone right here. All my shit's going to be it. And I didn't even Google it.
I'm sorry.
No, actually, that'll happen to me too. Yeah.
Yep.
So this is supposed to be, it's supposed to be the artistic heritage of China before communism. And the very next sentence I have is, please don't Google this unless you want unending ads popping up on your screen for infinity. So, spirituality, hooray, do whatever you want. Just don't stick it in my face. Right? That's how I feel about it. So underneath the swirling costumes and the symphonic music, they contend that both gymnastics and ballet originated in China, and which it wasn't.
Okay.
And they claim that this is a traditional dance, which is challenged by people who actually have studied the history of Chinese dance. Now, this I will say, you can look up online if you want to. If I can tell a difference, anybody can tell a difference. If you look at a piece of a Shen Yun performance and then you look up traditional Chinese dance, it is not the same thing.
Okay.
And I'm like, if I can tell the difference, I'm sure people who know anything about dance are like, oh, yeah, this is totally not. So what is Shen Yun? It's a US-based nonprofit. They now have 8 performance troupes and approximately 480 performers that tour globally, including 96 different cities within the US. Of course, they do not tour in China. They are not allowed. They're like, nah, no, you cannot come in.
Is it kind of like a competition with Cirque du Soleil?
It's that kind of dance, yes.
Okay.
Except I've not been to a Cirque du Soleil performance, but I don't think there's a whole bunch of religious propaganda shoved down your throat at Cirque du Soleil.
It depends on which one it is.
Really?
Shen Yun was founded in 2006 by Chinese expatriate followers of Falun Gong. So we're going to circle back to Falun Gong in a minute. They're based in Dragon Springs compound in Deer Park, New York, which someone mistakenly identified as upstate New York, even though it's south of Albany. I'm like, Jesus H. Okay, it's a northern New York thing. I can't help myself.
Yeah.
The property is registered as a church property under the name Dragon Springs Buddhists, which I'm not a Buddhist, so I don't know, but I would think that would piss off the Buddhists.
But they don't get pissed.
Right. So in that compound, the internet access is restricted. You're encouraged to not use modern medicine, and your social life will be supervised and managed for you. You know, arranged marriages, things like that. And no visitors are allowed. The gates are guarded. It's a very private compound. They don't let people in. So it is illegal to practice or follow Falun Gong in China. And some people are like, whoa. But that's not saying much. The People's Republic of China is officially an atheist state, but the government recognizes.
It does recognize it.
Shit. The government recognizes Buddhism, Taoism, Islam, Catholicism, and Protestantism.
Okay.
That's it. They have underground Catholics in China.
I feel like we've had underground Catholics here at some points. Christians talk some major shit about Catholics. Like, it's fascinating to me as an outsider to watch that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so Shen Yun and Falun Gong are theoretically separate organizations, but they share funds. They have the same executives and their same guiding mission, which is saving their audiences. But it's not entirely clear what you're being saved from.
Yourself.
Apparently.
I don't know. I'm going to tell you right now, if they have gymnastics and dance, they sound a million times better than New Life Churches Now and all those productions.
I'm glad you said that. Glad you said that instead of me. So Shen Yun and Falun Gong are opposed to evolution, atheism, homosexuality, and feminism.
Oh, so they're Christians.
Of course they're opposed to evolution. Who would want to evolve?
Right? They're not big on modern medicine. And I'm like, why is it cults? They don't want you taking an aspirin. It's just boggles the mind. That's the piece of it I don't get.
Because if God and God's savior there on earth, the one that you are probably doing sexual favors for or whatever, if he wanted you to be out of pain, he would bless you being out of pain. So I can help you with all of this because I have been threatening to start a cult since I was like 17 and figured that's how I was going to be rich one day. So like, you need to understand the thought process. I am here for you.
So, alrighty then. Shen Yun has been banned, as I said, from performing in China because it is considered an anti-society cult. And the Chinese government has gone as far as trying to influence other countries and specific venues to ban Shen Yun. A lot of people, and one that we all know, a writer that we all know. So people go to see these performances because they think it's just dance. And there's one where they have these big screens. And at one point there's I can't remember what force of nature it is, if it's a tsunami or a thundercloud or something, with the face of Karl Marx on it, destroying things. But the people who go see it, they think they're going to go see this hear this music and see the dance, but what they don't expect is the proselytizing. And after you write the word proselytizing about 47 times, you can never write it again because it's going to look wrong no matter how you write it. Yeah, so there's no mention made in any of the ads, in any of the program, in anything that you're going to get a big dose of this when you're at the performance. So there's an LA-based investigative reporter, his name is Samuel Braslow, who described Shen Yun's background in a 2020 article. So both Shen Yun and Epoch Times, which is a far-right media organization, which, geez, those are scarce on the ground, are funded and operated by members of Falun Gong, which is a controversial spiritual group that was banned by China's government in 1999. Falun Gong melds traditional Taoist principles with occasionally bizarre pronouncements from its Chinese-born founder and leader, Li Hongzhi. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that exactly correctly. Among other pronouncements, Li has claimed that aliens started invading human minds in the beginning of the 20th century, leading to mass corruption and the invention of computers. He's really got it in for
now he's
computers.
A Scientologist.
He has also denounced feminism and homosexuality and claimed he can walk through walls and levitate. But the central tenet of the group's wide-ranging belief system is its fierce opposition to communism. In 2000, Li founded Epoch Times to disseminate Falun Gong talking points to American readers. 6 years later, he launched Shen Yun as another vehicle to promote his teachings to mainstream Western audiences. So while they're nominally separate organizations, they operate in tandem for Falun Gong's ongoing PR campaign against the Chinese government. And Li is viewed as a near deity by his followers. And although nobody else has come close, that's his promise. If you do everything I tell you to do, you too will become like a deity.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm in. No,
Is it an MLM? Like, do you have to recruit so many individuals to get to the next level of deityness?
No.
You're a lower deity until you have 10 smaller deities under you.
It was so funny though, because so I go back and I look at the Chinese Communist Party because I wanted to be able to say something intelligent. And I cannot, because I'm having these flashbacks to high school social studies. And my teacher, Ronnie White, shout out Ronnie, who was trying to teach us about China. And it just went so far over everybody's head.
Oh.
He knew what he was talking about. It was a translation problem. He couldn't put it in terms we could understand. But this was, back when the earth was cooling. It was a minute ago.
I think it's funny. He's so anti his government, like his original country's government or whatever. And yet he hates the same things they do. So,
yeah.
Okay.
So this Epic Media Group includes New Tang Dynasty Television and the Epic Times newspaper. The newspaper, it's quite the publication. It promotes conspiracy theories, provides a lot of anti-vax misinformation, and has produced a series of pro-Trump documentaries with air quotes around the word documentaries. Despite the fact that they tell their followers not to get involved in politics at all.
Because that's our job.
Apparently. So the US isn't singled out though, because they've been supporting far-right candidates in Europe as well. And the papers there do the same thing.
Okay. Is there any, do you have any comfort associated with the fact that crazy seems to attract crazy? So at least they all band together. Does that make you feel comfortable at all? I mean, it's scary, but at the same time, at least they identify themselves very quickly.
Well, they do. The problem is they keep growing their numbers. And then I'm like, there's some comfort to it. Although I still think, of course, vocal minority, right? But it seems like the vocal minority, at least in the US, can do a lot of fucking damage.
Yeah. So I read through, and I don't usually do this. I don't usually have to read the material 3 times to pull what I want out of it. It's hard for me to distill down Falun Gong because what they say they stand for and what they say they oppose, those are so diametrically opposite each other. I can't get my mind to bend that far. So Falun Gong aspires to enable the practitioner to ascend spiritually through moral rectitude and the practice of a set of exercises and meditation. The 3 stated tenets of the belief are truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance.
Again, every religion preaches that shit and then goes exactly opposite.
And then they go ape shit, banana sandwich, and say mixed races are an alien plot.
What? Say that again? What? I'm sorry.
Mixing races is an alien plot.
Why is there alien in there?
Different ethnicities get different heavens.
Okay.
So Lee urges his followers, anybody who follows his religion, to focus on these 3 touchstones and not talk about anything else when they're out talking to people about their religion. They just talk about truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. They don't talk about hating the gays or anything else. They're supposed to focus on its 4 standing exercises and 1 seated meditation while they're focusing on improving their moral character. So they too will one day be able to levitate and see through walls. Also, his other supernatural talents include invisibility and teleportation, both of which he developed as a child. I think he started being able the look on Shannon's face is just precious.
His invisible friend taught him.
Yeah. Some of it he developed at age 8. I think that was seeing through walls and teleportation. No, levitation. Sorry. Levitation. It does. Now, here's where they differ from a traditional cult. They encourage active participation in the secular world. So you are supposed to be a law-abiding member of society. You're supposed to follow the laws wherever it is that you live. You're supposed to do good deeds and turn the other cheek. That is not probably how they would word that. When faced with opposition, there's no smoking, there's no alcohol. And here's a good one. Members cannot kill living things to obtain food, although they are not officially required to be vegetarians. So I don't know.
As long as somebody else kills it for
That's
you,
what I'm
it's
thinking.
fine.
You're allowed to have a good job and a nice house and money, but you're not supposed to be attached to any of them. You're not supposed to like having them.
Oh, okay.
Ditto lust and sexual desire. You are allowed monogamous hetero relationships, but everything else is immoral.
But anything you do in that monogamous relationship is fine.
I didn't go that deeply into it. So there's a point where you go, no, I can't. I'm going to have to bleach my eyeballs. So Lee teaches that being a homosexual makes one unworthy of being human. And you've obviously lost your ability to reason. And apparently, I couldn't even make sense of this. He somehow compares homosexuality and organized crime. They're
That would be fabulous, Mob.
And there's the idea.
And you can tell anywhere they've done a crime because there is fucking glitter everywhere.
Everywhere.
There's the idea that if God is going to start smiting, he's going to start with the gays.
Okay.
So the LGBTQ plus community is welcome in Falun Gong as long as they give up all the bad conduct.
Jesus.
Uh-huh. Oh, and then there were the whole alien thing. Aliens invented computers and airplanes and war. Aliens walk among us.
Computers, airplanes, war.
War. Like, I don't know, the first two cavemen duked it out, but okay.
Right?
That was alien.
Aliens walk among us, disguised as humans to corrupt us. Or he has also said that aliens are replacing humans with soulless clones which the aliens can then inhabit.
Oh, that explains so much about my life.
Apparently your soul takes up a lot of space that an alien can just wedge in there when your soul is removed.
Yeah.
I felt like a soulless clone for a long time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's basically like demons. It's basically just copying humans.
Yes.
In possession, but okay.
Okay. So, according to Falun Gong, thousands of its members have been killed while in custody in China. They also claim that living incarcerated members are having their organs harvested by the Communist Party.
Oh.
However, there's been no independent corroboration of this. There were some politicians globally, at least one or two of them were in the US, who jumped on this bandwagon immediately, but there was no independent verification. And actually, a lawyer who works for Falun Gong has said that only 2 or 3 of their followers have died in prison. And it was just, it seemed to be implying that it was natural causes. So,
I mean, I wouldn't put any of that past. I'm not finding that part as unbelievable as the rest of it. It's China.
So Lee, one of the things that Lee does is maintains his air of mystery. So when his biography was available, because they used to have a little biography of him attached to the literature, it is no longer available. But it read more like, and there's a specific word for this, and I don't know why I didn't write it down. There's a specific word for the biography of a saint. And that's what this read like. It was all the beautiful, wonderful, magical things he had done. But there's no mention to be found anywhere of things like, who are his parents? Did he have any other family? Where did he grow up? What was his childhood like? What jobs did he hold? None of this is available through Falun Gong. And we love those details here. I mean, we're always talking about where did people grow up? What was their background like? So
where did it go horribly wrong?
Right. And some of them were just born into such a shitty situation. It's like, not everybody born into that situation goes the same way, but you can sort of see where the bend came from.
Yeah.
So in 2002 at a Falun Gong convention, Lee told his followers that his situation isn't something that ordinary human beings can imagine. He described his origins like this: I came from the inside and came from the outside. I came from nothing, formed into something, appeared at the pinnacle of the colossal firmament, and then from there I descended step by step to the lowest surface, the three realms. No being knows who I am.
You're right, dude. We don't know who the fuck you are.
So
I feel like that was waxing really poetic, the entire conception and birthing process. The three like channels in, like, I mean, come on.
Yeah, I'll give him points for creativity.
Yeah,
So,
I think it was very poetic. I like it.
after Falun Gong was banned in China, there was some propaganda that came out. The media presented some testimony from several people who claimed to have known him knew him when he was growing up, knew him as an adult, worked next to him at the office. This was published for the purpose of propaganda, so take it with a grain of salt. However, there's nothing horrible in here. I'm thinking if this is propaganda, then maybe I don't know what that word means. He was a quiet kid, shy and reserved. Nobody can remember him having any special training, either from religious leaders or in the art of Kung Fu, which he also claims to be an expert at. He spent several years in the army playing trumpet in the band. When he got out of the army, but before he became a demigod, he was a grumpy, argumentative neighbor who didn't like people looking at him, and he wasn't above rounding up friends to jump a neighbor who bothered him.
Oh.
He is or was married, but I can't find any mention of is he still married? What happened to that woman? There's just, it's like he's tried really hard to erase. He's tried to do really what communist China, what the Chinese Communist Party has done, try to erase the things you don't like. He's done the exact same thing. He took a page from their playbook. So, if the worst you can say about somebody is, well, he was a quiet child. I mean, which is obviously not something anybody could ever say about me, but, and so I was just curious what it is. And I'm curious about this, not enough that I've actually done the research. Do you think the U.S. has more cults than other countries?
I don't know. I think we're just aware of them because we're in the U.S. and the U.S. is pretty narcissistic. So
that could be.
We think everything happens here. We're like, it doesn't happen anywhere else. Well,
and then we also, I mean, we just have so much, what's the word I'm looking for? We have so much
diversity.
Actually the opposite of, not the opposite of. We have so much lack of something in association with religion, right? Like we sit there and say that we're this giant melting pot and everybody's welcome, blah, 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 blah. But religion and politics, but religion really, because even the politics stuff has a religion undertaint to it, right? We have no, what's the word I'm looking for? We have no,
I don't know, but
we
don't have an official religion, but we do.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that from a cult perspective, I think that they get so much more, God, I cannot believe I cannot use words right now, fantasticalized in the American media than because of the fact that like religion just is way too important to way too many Americans as a tenet of their belief system versus like, I think what it should be for.
Well, so a lot of them just want to use it as a big stick to beat people.
Right.
With,
yeah.
So.
Or a club that you're a part of that, and then you try to gatekeep even people that are supposedly in your club out of your club because they don't think exactly how you think. So a lot of the giant cults that we've had, right? Like most of them have a Christianity background, right? They're supposedly all Christians, just the true Christian or the true Messiah or the true whatever, right? Like they can't even get along with each other. So well, I don't know. I mean, maybe they don't, I mean, I don't know. You'd think the church with England and everything, they would have all kinds of awesome cults over there.
Maybe they just suppress it better.
Perhaps. there's not England's not big enough to have a cult. I don't know. We have lots of places where you can go buy land where there aren't a lot of people around you.
Yeah, England, like what fits pretty much in Texas or something. So like pretty close, right? So like, and Texas alone has had how many of our cults?
The fact that a state here would basically be a country somewhere else, right? Self-governing with I think that probably contributes to some of this too. That's a very specific setup that we have there.
Yeah.
But it always amazes me how it's just like, I'm going to leave my country. I'm going to leave the country of my birth where all my family is, where everything I know is. I'm going to go to the United States and I'm going to start a religion. Okay, you do you.
Well, I mean, he couldn't have done it there as in a communist country, right?
And actually he did start it there, but everybody's like, nah.
I mean, it's not like he could have started stockpiling money and the government wouldn't have noticed.
That's true. And by the time the Chinese Communist Party banned Falun Gong, he had already moved. He was, I believe, in France, maybe Paris, but he was already out of the country. So he knew well in advance what was going to happen.
I don't know what the laws are in other countries, but I would assume China would not be one of them that I mean, here forming a religious organization is like, money in the bank, right? So I don't know if other countries have those types of, tax evading incentives.
I don't think so, because we've had I covered one, and I think it was an Indian base, right? He was from India and he couldn't do this shit there, and so brought all imported people
I remember
to this valley because there's so many benefits to having a religious organization here.
Isn't that an interesting thought from a political standpoint? If that was one of the things to change, right? That it wasn't fiscally beneficial to establish religious organizations here in the United States, how much of our other bullshit would change? Well, because when all of a sudden it wasn't a money cash cow.
Yeah. You can be a religious organization, you can get that tax exemption, and you don't even have to have services or do any kind of outreach, because we have big organizations here in town that do some nominal, they do one week program over the summer, and that's their outreach.
Yeah.
I don't know who they think they're reaching, but you don't even have to have services to be a religious organization, which is not to say there aren't religious organizations out there doing good works in the community.
Absolutely.
Because there absolutely are, but there are some who are just,
it's easy to abuse. And
yes,
because again, government and religion are so closely tied together here that nothing's going to happen about it. Just like term limitations on senators, it's not going to happen, because the people who need to make those decisions and make those movements are the ones who are perpetrating it. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a downer. Hey, Cameron, why don't you talk about your topic?
That's why I didn't want to go last, because it just kind of ends with a thud.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm going to be talking about rape, so. No.
Okay, well, so I researched Betty Neumar, and full disclosure, when you originally brought up Betty Neumar, I heard Julie Neumar. So I thought that the Catwoman had ended up becoming a Black Widow serial killer. So I was quite disappointed when I kept looking at her thinking, I don't think she's Julie Neumar. And then I realized the name and I was like, oh, shit. So anyways.
I don't think drag queens would look up to this woman.
Yeah, I had Tu Wong Fu in my head in one side, and then I started researching her and I was like, I was not in the right headspace. So anyway, so I will say that from the stuff that I researched, I was a little disappointed, because they kind of fantasticalized, I don't know if it's a word, fantasticalized her, right? Almost within years of her death, right? Like everything came to a head within years of her death. And when I researched multiple avenues and videos and stuff like that, and there just wasn't nearly as much information as I thought there could be on her, which I found kind of annoying. So I'll just do an overview of what I learned. So So she was married 5 times. The first time was her high school sweetheart. She's only married to him for 2 years, had a child with him. Less than a year later, she was hooked up with her second husband, had a child with him. They were only together 2 years. And then less than a year later, that was the part that I got very interested in, was like okay. So first guy, she divorced. So first guy, high school sweetheart, divorced him. He went on and like years and years and years later, 20 years later, right? He had married 2 more times. So her first child, her only boy, was with him. Her second husband, only married to him for 2 years. I believe he was also abusive. She seemed to attract abusive alcoholics. Was with him for 2 years. And then a year later, she got her third husband. Her third husband was in the Navy. They'd been together for 11 years, and he died. So the first guy, okay, still alive. Second guy, supposedly froze. So this is another thing where I thought was really, really strange, because he supposedly froze to death sleeping in his truck, got drunk, fell asleep in his truck, froze to death, parked on a pier. Okay. That statement is from her. Like, where the frick are the medical records? Where is the police report? Nothing.
Question: what years are these taking place?
They started, okay, so I don't have the years written down specifically, but they started in the 50s. So she was born in 31.
Okay.
And so she married her first one like the end of the 40s, beginning of the 50s.
Right.
And then the first 3 were in like by the end of 50, right? Was her third husband, right? Or maybe the 60s. So she ended up becoming a hairdresser. And then it also, I didn't write this down, but I think she graduated high school. The first guy was in Ohio. I think the second guy, James, was in New York. So she bounced all over the place too. The third guy, I believe, was in Florida, Richard. He was in the Navy. They moved around for quite a few years. She had 2 kids. So that was another thing. So these are the things that I like glommed onto, especially like I was trying to tie in my whole like romance side, because I was like, all right, so let's look at what kind of skills Betty had, right? Because like how she like, you know, less than a year later hooking in her next husband and stuff, right? So first guy's alive, second guy, according to her, froze to death, right? And I just found that very strange that there was no like police report or anything to corroborate her story. It was just like, he just died. She's the one telling people he died. Third guy, 11 years. Originally it was ruled a suicide. So that he was still in the Navy at the time, because NCIS is the one that picked up the investigation from local PD. Her 2 children are in another room. I think it was 13 and 11. So she also like popped out babies really quick as soon as she like hooked up with whomever. This guy she'd never had a baby with, but both of her children. So they were in another room. They heard mom and dad arguing, gunfire. There was all of these. So it was ruled a suicide.
Even with an argument.
Yeah. On the flip side, Florida PD had like 1 gunshot in the side. NCIS had 2 gunshots, which the crime theory people and stuff were like, like if you try to commit suicide, you don't see people double tapping themselves, because your body like immediately like reacts. Like as soon as you do it, your body's like, fling, fling gun, like
right. And also there's the whole shit, and then you can't do it again anyway, right? Because the reality has just hit you. So there's so many reasons why that's atypical.
Right. So NCIS had 2 gunshots, but they still ruled it a suicide. And because it was ruled a suicide, they threw the records away after a couple years. So like the records didn't exist. So you have to understand that like her last husband. So this is in the 50s and 60s. Actually, this would have been in the, I think 70s, because they were married 11 years. So at this point, you're looking at 15 years. 15 years from like the early 50s. So, you know, mid 60s, that this guy, God, you know, my math might be off a little bit because it just doesn't feel like it was that old, but all of the records and everything associated with that. So by the time that her last husband died, which was in 2008,
Wow.
and like stuff started happening, like, you know, the first three were like, okay, so yeah, he died in the mid 70s. I know that because her first husband, so this is, I think that she's getting a little bit of a raw rap because I really don't think she had anything to do with the first two, for sure. Clarence, her first husband, who had been married 2 times after her, he got killed in a supposable robbery at his auto shop. And by the way, 2 of her ex-husbands were mechanics.
Interesting.
She definitely had a type.
Right.
My girl had a type and she knew how to work it somehow because they all married her very quickly. Okay, so, which I do. I even have a little note that I was like,
So her
"What
first
kind of girls are
husband,
Betty rocking?" Huh?
yeah, her first husband, whose ages he's married 2 other people since then. He gets killed, and they're like, let's just blame her.
That's one of her 5 that they're calling. So the entire thing about her was, is she a Black widow or is she the most unluckiest woman in love? And I think that's a little bit of both.
Right.
So the third guy's dead. Oh, so I'm sorry. So then the first guy dies in 1970. And so that was who her son was with. So he dies 15, 20, almost 20 years after they get divorced. He dies. And then a couple years later, it looks like her third husband, Richard, the Navy guy, dies. So then 3 years later, she meets Gentry. So this is where we start getting into the actual people. But I just felt like the fact that they just didn't have a ton of information on the first 3 was really lackluster, considering the fact that they're trying to pin her as this like Black widow.
Mm-hmm.
And yet 3 of them, I'm not like, maybe not, like maybe the third guy, maybe, I don't know.
That's
So
the thing we run into all the time. Like,
really?
Yeah. And it's the less information there is, it's like, the less true it probably is for that part. Right. And maybe later all that stuff is legitimate and they're just trying so hard to make it more than it is.
Yeah. So the fourth husband, so I was really looking at this and trying to like look at like the progression of her, right? So supposedly she was born pretty poor. The only way she was going to make it out of her situation was to marry well, and then she kept giving it a try. It wasn't working out the first couple times. Third time, 11 years. I mean, if you're a Black widow, you can stick it out for 11 years with somebody. Like, I don't know. Like, I just felt like that was like, yeah.
Well, depending on what his job in the Navy was, he wasn't around all that much.
It's a possibility. Yeah, that's a possibility.
So really they were only together half that time if he was deployed 6 months at a time. So.
And supposedly he was an alcoholic and he was abusive. So maybe she was able to put up with it so I also looked at this as an age thing, right? So the first 2 husbands and even the third husband, she's in her 20s. By the time that he goes bye-bye, she's in her mid 30s at least, right? With 2 kids, 2 teenage kids. And then she meets the fourth husband, Gentry. I did not write down. Can't remember might be Thomas Gentry, I think. Okay, so then that's who she has her third kid with, Kelly. Okay. He was also military. He was Army. He was also financially secure. They did 18 years together. He retired. They moved to North Carolina where his family gave him like a house. So they had a house. They had his retirement coming in. He also had a job. She was a hairdresser. They have a kid together. And so this is where we start getting into the, maybe she was a Black widow. I don't know. I don't know. I don't really feel comfortable with the Black widow title as much as I think like, at this point, she's in her 40s to 50s. I feel like her taking shit off of people is just kind of running thin. Menopause is kicking in.
That's right.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
Comes back around.
Right. So apparently at the 18, at close to 18 years together, the marriage was just irreparable at this point. It wasn't good. He was having an affair. And based upon things that were said, I am going to guesstimate. I'm doing my own sleuthing. I think that she knew that he was getting ready to leave her ass, and he had a house and he had a retirement and he had an insurance policy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so she was out of town. She was 3 hours away in Augusta, Georgia, getting their truck fixed. And he was shot like 6 times entering their house on a supposable robbery. So there was just a lot associated with that where it was like, I don't know, right? The fact that he was having an affair, the fact that that he had told his brother. And so the whole Black Widow thing came about because his brother spent like 20 years begging the police to reopen the case, to look into it. Like, this was not a robbery. She's evil. And he was, wow. Every video clip I saw of him, whoo, that is a man that hates that woman. And he had no problem telling everybody what he thought of her. Like ABC News, he was just like, I was like, ooh.
So, I could get behind that.
Right.
I would do that.
If I remember correctly, he died in the 90s. Early 90s, I think.
The brother or the husband?
The husband, Gentry. The fourth husband died in the early 90s. So this goes back to that whole Black Widow thing. Like, I have a hard time with the Black Widow thing because I just feel like if it's not like within a couple years over and over and over again, like.
Well, that's the question though. I don't know enough about Black Widows to say if normally they stick it out for a while, maybe they stay until things aren't good anymore or something like that. Yeah, that's what I was
thinking. Maybe she really wanted the marriages to work.
Right. Because I think we define Black Widow by what we've seen in movies forever. And of course, that was the one after another, because they're going through this in a systemized way and they're doing it purely for that. But I don't know that that's the right definition in reality. So that actually makes me realize where my gap in knowledge is right there. Like, it's something I'd be interested in knowing more about.
I will tell you the only Black Widow that I keep seeing in my head, you guys are going to laugh, is literally, and I can't remember what her character's name is at the moment in my head, but the character from the Addams Family, Fester's woman.
Oh, right.
That's the only one I keep thinking of. And she killed him off quick. So, that's my standard for Black Widow.
Joan Cusack.
Oh, she was
brilliant. Yes.
I just saw that not too long ago. What was her name?
Oh. I just like Joan. No, it wasn't Joan. It was something like that, like Betty. It was something a fairly common name because I can see Olivia Dukakis's character going, really? I could, you've separated us, you've done this, you've done that, all of that I could forgive, but pastels?
Right.
And she was so stylized. Her presentation for that movie was so not Joan Cusack.
Right.
What we think of as Joan
Cusack.
Blonde and the makeup and the form-fitting. I mean, she was gorgeous.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. So, okay. So now we're moving on. 5 years later, after Gentry dies, we're on to the fifth husband. And at this point, I think she's back in Florida. So like she was in Florida, met the third husband, the fourth husband, and then moved to North Carolina with the fourth husband. And now she's back in Florida, if I remember correctly. And this guy, Neumar, this is John Neumar. He apparently, for some reason, I could not find anywhere what he actually did. I don't know if he was military as well. She seemed to work at barbershops a lot, or the hair salons on military installations, or at least that's what it gave me the impression of, or she owned her own, because I think that's how she met a lot of these guys, was cutting hair. So he had a couple kids on his own before they met, and he was older when they met. So I think at this point she's going to be in her 50s, she's going to be in her early 60s, and he was, I think, in his late 60s when they hooked up, and then they were together for 16 years. And during that time, and I think the kids were out of the house by then and everything, so he was like older, obviously, and apparently he was, he had he had himself set up, he had a retirement coming in, he had everything, all was good. And over a 16-year span, at some point, maybe towards the end, they had to declare bankruptcy. They had hundreds of thousands of dollars, I think, in credit card debt. And this is the part that was really, really interesting. Apparently, she was a part of a Ponzi scheme where this is like she was, in essence, getting friends and family and everything to give her $100. And that $100 would turn into $100,000 to help like this rich European family's medical fees or something. The entire thing sounded so ridiculous that the fact that anybody believed it, I kind of was like, you deserve to lose that $100. Because every time I heard it said, I was like, what? Doesn't even sound plausible. But, so they were married 16 years. Well, he, towards the end of that, like I said, severe debt. So there's, but nothing about their lifestyle showed any kind of extravagance. There was nobody can understand where the hell the money went. So he died of like sepsis, maybe, and something. He died of like a combination of things, but in essence, it really looked like there's a possibility it could have been poison related. Okay. So when he died,
I was going to say, if she could kill someone else through sepsis, that's a trick.
Right.
That takes some doing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they said sepsis. I'll have to look it up again, but but it was like a combination of things, his body, his organs and everything were giving out, but he had been relatively healthy before that. So, the family was immediately like, and the family hated her. Like, I guess the kids and stuff were like, yeah, so she's tried to take out insurance policies on us. Oh, yeah. Okay. So somewhere within here, by the way, her first husband, Clarence, when he died in 1970, in 1985, their child, Gary, the only boy she had, committed suicide. Oh. And she got a $10,000 insurance policy paid out to her, even though he was married.
A lot of them kill off their kids too.
Well, and then there was, like I said, there were other ones like her, in essence, stepchildren or whatever, were like, yeah, she wanted to open up an insurance policy against me and put herself as the beneficiary and and it was like all of this stuff. So all of this stuff, of course, none of this is being talked about until after, right? So he dies. She immediately, even though he was a Catholic and he had a burial plot, she immediately had him cremated.
That's suspicious.
That's always a red flag.
And she didn't tell his kids that he died.
Oh, that sucks.
They found out because it was listed, I think, in the newspaper.
Oh, that's harsh.
So then they find out, oh, nothing of Daddy exists anymore because Daddy was cremated. So all of this is going on. And then the brother of the fourth husband was like, no. And they finally were like, all right, we're going to reopen this. They reopened this. And I think it's because of the death of the fifth husband that they were like, maybe we should be looking at this again, right? So they reopen it and they find that she had solicited up to 3 people within weeks of the fourth husband's death to kill him, one of which was a ex-cop. How the hell he was ever, it wasn't made a big deal at that time. So there is literally 50 years of bumbling, of horrible police work being accomplished to get us to 2008 when she was finally brought up on charges and pulled into jail, right? So she ended up dying in the very beginning of 2011 of cancer. I don't remember what kind, but of cancer. So she died before she actually went to trial.
Wow. She
died completely never admitting anything, saying that she loved her husband's. And she was actually, so here's another thing. She's a little gangster, man, because it kind of goes back to that whole I think as she got older, it was for love in the beginning, and then as she got older, she was kind of like I'm not putting up with this, because she was kind of gangster in a lot of ways. The reason why the brother of the fourth husband was so adamant from day one that is because he got shot in his house, and then she came back from Augusta, Georgia, a couple hours later, right? And she didn't cry, she didn't freak out, she didn't nothing about the fact that her husband was dead.
Right.
She had no emotional thing. Now, she said that she had taken a Valium And so she was just like space cadeted, I guess. But so yeah, so they don't know if she's just the most unlucky woman ever or if she is really a Black Widow. I feel like there is a good possibility that the last 3, she might have had something, if not everything, to do with them. But if she did, she wasn't really good at it because, so like the first husband, she didn't get no money off of the first husband. Like, I mean, well, they'd been divorced for 20 years. So the second husband, she got nothing. The third husband, she got nothing. So she didn't start seeing any kind of money until her son died in 85. And then Gentry, she got the house that she sold immediately. And she got his, whatever his military pension or whatever was there for her afterwards. And then the fifth husband, they were so far in debt, there was nothing. Now she put them in debt. Now here's another interesting thing that I thought was very frustrating because there was no follow-up on this after she died. When she was arrested and put in jail, her lawyer requested lesser, come on, like when she was arrested, she was 77. Wow. Right? Like by the time she was finally arrested, she was 77. So they're like, can we get her out at least on bail? Can we get her out? The prosecution found and presented 28 aliases, passports and IDs of hers that they found.
What was she doing with them?
No idea, because nobody has followed up on the investigation. It makes me crazy.
She's dead, so nobody's ever going to follow up on it unless there's an open crime they think they can tie her to. And even then, they're not going to spend their time on it because you can't prosecute her.
I know, but that was not satisfying to me. So I would like, why did you go down this rabbit hole that I will never get satisfaction from now?
How many fake IDs? 28?
28 aliases. They found passports and IDs.
Who could keep that many identities straight?
Well, and if you look at that, and then you look at the Ponzi schemes, and then you look at all of this money that disappeared, and it was not invested into the home or into extravagant things.
What was she doing with her money?
Right. And where was he? If she was, was she at home ever? What? Yeah.
Well, she has 2 daughters, and both of them just like completely believe that their mother was innocent and stuff like that. But like, part of me is like, man, start doing money. Like in my head, I always boil everything down. It doesn't matter if it's politics, religion, whatever. I always boil it down to money. Follow the money. Follow the money. And so like, I would be very interested if like the girls have any kind of like, underground bunkers full of gold or something, like.
Well, and maybe it was something where like they were genuine marriages at first, right? Because 11, however short the first one, then 11 years and 18 years or whatever it was. Maybe she kept having to start over from scratch because she didn't get anything out of it. And she was like, that's it. I'm done having to restart myself like this. Mm-hmm. Because especially back when she was starting this at the beginning, the first 2 divorces, she probably couldn't even legally have like a bank account in her name.
No,
right?
So she wouldn't have been able to.
No. So how do you start over from that? And maybe that just finally jaded her and she said, I'm not marrying for love anymore.
Well, and so, I mean, it explains also, though, so you figure she's in her 20s, so she was cute, right? So even with kids, she was still able to hook a man within a year, or maybe she was even dating them before she left the one. She might have had shit lined up for the first 3.
That's very true.
Because within 2, 4, 5 to 6 years, she was on her 3rd husband already. So you figure she was before 25 years old. She had 2 children, 25 years old, and she's on her 3rd husband already. So she had to go from husband to husband in the beginning very quickly. Yeah. Between the 3rd and 4th husband. Yeah. Between the 3rd and 4th husband, it starts getting a little bit longer, but I think that's also due to age. It's a little harder to hook a man when you're older.
It's about age, kids. And now you've got kids. You've got this. There's a lot of men who are like, no. I'm not even going to start with that. Mm-hmm. So I just find it funny that she was able to be charming enough to hook these dudes, but their families hated her. So like she didn't have enough charm to go anywhere outside of her pants. Like if you're not getting my pants, you don't like me.
They did. The families were like, she's an awful woman. She's rude to people. She was definitely a Karen, 100% a Karen.
Okay.
How old was the son who died that she got life insurance from?
Like 35.
Oh, because I was going to say, I could see.
And married.
Did she buy the policy or did he?
I think she did.
Because I could see, like, if your adult children are unattached and they have life insurance through work, I can understand they put their parents' name on it because their parents are the one who are going to take care of everything if something happens to them.
But he was married, yeah.
Right. And I can see if he had just been recently married, if he was like 26, recently got married, hadn't switched everything over yet. But yeah, 35, that's.
And he committed suicide, and apparently, apparently, he committed suicide by shooting himself. Apparently, he saw the third husband dead. Him, actually, both children did, Gary and Peggy. And apparently, he was 11. No, he was 13.
He was 13 and she was 11.
He was 13 when Richard died, which was the third husband of the supposed suicide with 2 bullets. And apparently that fucked him up. So like from that point to 35, he was always slightly emotionally unstable, is what even the wife said. His wife said. So.
Well, it would fuck you up. I don't see how it couldn't. And since that one was a longer marriage and he was from the first one, then he was old enough that this guy had been in his life and been his father for most of his life in a way. So,
well, and I thought that was interesting too, because the second husband, who only lasted 2 years and supposedly froze to death, he actually adopted Gary.
Okay.
So it was like this, like I said, started in Ohio. She went to New York. She was with James in New York. James adopted Gary. Then they had Peggy together. And then 2 years later, he's dead and she's moving on to Richard. So Richard definitely was the only father figure he knew for, his most formative years, right?
Right. When he's old enough to know anything about it. And now also, it was making me wonder, like, is she just a uniform bunny? Or after a certain point, she went, oh, this is what I have to do. Or was that part of a plan? I feel like a lot of those uniform bunnies think that there's some sort of consistency and safety net in somebody military. Like, having grown up here in Colorado Springs, there were a lot of, funnily enough, it was academy chasers, right? They were after the Air Force guys because they thought that would be better than an Army guy. So does anybody guys? Yes, they do.
And as third generation Air Force, I will tell you they are. But anyways.
Right. I know. I was not Air Force, but both of my grandparents, both of my dad's parents were, and he was. But yeah, it's just funny. And I'd have known a uniform chaser who went after Army every time. Her first husband actually died, and I knew him. I met them together, and then he was in the Middle East somewhere. I don't remember where, so I don't want to say the wrong country, but the base was bombed and he died in that, supposedly. I felt like there was something really weird about that. Probably there was something wonky about what she was saying had happened. And she was married again within a year to a different Army guy. So fascinate me.
Being ex-military, I would definitely tell you that if I lived in a different time where I was not allowed to have bank accounts and shit like that, I definitely would have gone military. Oh yeah. Right. Because there is a, like, I mean, and back then they didn't get paid shit. Like, we were below we were lower, below middle class, bordering poverty as United States military members, but we had housing.
Right.
We always had, you always knew you were going to have a roof over your head. Worst case scenario, like, they were going to make sure that you had someplace to live. So if I was a woman in that time frame, like, yeah, I would be chasing after military guys left and right.
And once you're in it, there's also a certain lifestyle that kind of comes about from it. And we're not talking like big ritzy lifestyle, like a doctor's wife, but it's still a lifestyle that you come to rely on, because dependents are some of the most awful people I've met sometimes. This weird sense of entitlement as a military wife. And the ones who purposely chased those uniforms were the worst of those dependent styles. I'm not saying all dependents, but I've known, again, grew up here in Colorado Springs in my formative years. So, and I knew several uniform bunnies. It was just like the Air Force Academy has a set night out or something like that once a month. They used to, whatever it was here. And they would come in. I worked with 2 of them at the same time, and they did the stuff together. It was totally Officer and a Gentleman. They were actively trying. One of them was really pretty. One of them was the homeliest little thing. I don't know if either of them ended up with a military guy, but the homely one would come in and she would have gotten her face waxed. And you'd see she'd come into work and she'd still have the red because she was a redhead and she had really light skin. So it would stay for a while. The other one was a brunette. I guess I don't think she had to wax though. So that was probably it. Give her time. Really let her hit perimenopause. Then she'll have brown hair on her face. But
I was gonna say unusual that a redhead would have to at that age.
I don't even know.
Brunette would not.
Right. Because these people, I was a teenager. They were both just really probably 20, 21 around there. Mm-hmm. But we all knew, they're going to go and have their little cleaning day and get their nails done and get their hair done and wax anything they have to wax and shave everything else. And we all knew when it was time for that night out, because we were at a movie theater and that's one of the popular things is all the cadets would come and go to the movie theater. So yeah, no, I don't even know if she had enough facial hair for that to be a thing. Because again, I don't remember seeing facial hair on her, but I didn't pay that much attention. I don't pay that much attention to
redheads being fair skinned, generally, if you do,
you can't see
slight,
it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see it, but I'm looking for it.
Right. Don't stand in profile out in the sun, but other than that, you're okay.
Yeah, it's the white German mustache for the blondes and the redheads. It's the
whereas
you can't see it from far away, but up close, you're like, oh my God.
You're gonna see my facial hair, period. That's just how that's gonna work. So yeah, no, I find that whole thing fascinating. When I knew these people before I saw An Officer and a Gentleman, and then I was like, holy shit! I guess this is a thing everywhere. And that was how I learned about that. But yeah, no, she was chasing that for, I really think at the time frame that we're talking about, that safety net and that consistency and all of that. So what, she went from like 2 mechanics to military after that. She was like, mechanics have no job security.
Well, and so that's the funny thing, because I think it was the first guy was a mechanic, and I think the 5th guy, there's another mechanic in there, and I don't think it's the second guy. The second guy, they said outside of him supposedly freezing to death, and that was her story. There was nothing on him. It was infuriating. First guy's a mechanic, and I think the 5th guy had an auto shop too. I think the Neumar had an auto shop.
And then they're the ones who went bankrupt. Well, who didn't have the money. She done fucked that one up. She got overzealous is what she did.
But I really want to know what all of the aliases and where all the money is. Like, I want to know.
Right? Little did we know she was actually a spy playing a 50s housewife.
Oh, that could be. That would be interesting. Yeah. I would watch that.
Right? All right. I'm going to do mine now. Here we go. I'm doing the Menendez brothers, and this is a follow-up because I did Gypsy Rose Blanchard getting out of prison after being instrumental in her mother's death with Munchausen's by proxy. And something that I kept seeing everywhere that you saw too was, great, Gypsy Rose is out. Now, what about the Menendez brothers? And I was like, well, why are people equating that? I didn't remember. And the reason for that is, ultimately, this all went down 96. That's the year I was graduating high school. That's the year I got married. Like, I wasn't paying attention to that. I heard about it. We all heard about it when it was happening, but I didn't know anything, right? your mind was on other things. So the Menendez brothers. On August 20th, 1989, police responded to reports of gunshots in a Beverly Hills mansion. When they arrived, they found Jose and Kitty Menendez. I think her real name's Mary Louise, but her nickname was Kitty, and I'm going with that because it's easier. Because it was Mary Louise. It wasn't Mary. It was Mary Louise. Dead in their den. Their sons, Joseph Lyle, 21, and Eric Galen, 18, were in the home and claimed they'd arrived there from seeing Batman and attending a food festival and had found their parents dead. Jose had been shot 6 times. His was mostly from behind. Kitty had been shot 10, including a gunshot to her face, but her gunshots were to her face and chest, pretty much, her torso. 2 Mossberg 12-gauge shotguns had been used. At first, the boys weren't suspected, so they were left to continue their lives. Jose was an RCA executive at the time, so investigations focused on him as a target, right? The mob was considered, but while the investigation was happening, the brothers were living exorbitantly, traveling around the world, including trips to the Caribbean, Israel for tennis tournaments. Eric was actually a great talent at tennis. This was his future. And they went to London, for example. So just all over the place.
How old were the boys when this happened?
They were 18 and 21.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm sorry, but what they're doing makes absolute sense.
Well, and you'll see more that it does.
Because they're young and stupid.
Yeah, their relatives said they were just doing what they'd always been doing.
Yeah.
They already had access to this money. They were already doing all this shit. They just kept doing it after their parents died.
Yes.
But Lyle went and bought a Porsche Carrera. Eric hired a tennis coach, and this tennis coach was the one going with him to Israel for these tournaments. They even moved out of the family home and got condos next door to each other. All in all, it would be discovered they'd spent about $700,000 after their parents' death.
Wow.
This told police the brothers might have killed their parents to get their vast estate. They asked one of Eric's friends to wear a wire during a get-together, and he outright asked Eric if he'd killed his parents, and Eric said no. It wouldn't be until 1990 when Eric's psychologist's mistress, got that? Eric's psychologist's mistress. I was like, that sounds super healthy. Her name was Judalon Smith, got dumped by the shrink, whose name was Jerome Oziel, and went to the police in an act of revenge on her ex to tell them that he'd confided in her that Eric had confessed during sessions to killing his parents. And I was
none of that is admissible.
No.
Oh, here we go.
So you think.
And I was like, is that really revenge on the psychologist, or is that revenge on some kid you don't know? Anyway, at that time, Eric was in Israel for tennis, but they nabbed Lyle on March 8th and Eric on the 11th when he got home. They were not allowed to talk to each other, and pains were taken to keep them apart. Due to their ability to get their hands on money, they were held without bail. The question that arose from this was whether the information violated doctor-patient privilege.
Yeah,
Otherwise, right. And really in hearsay, right? But otherwise, the confession, which was on tape, so it's not hearsay anymore, as the sessions were recorded, was admissible. If not, police had no evidence. If so, they had great evidence. Oziel claimed that Lyle had threatened him, which negated doctor-patient privilege. That's the other brother, not the one who was seeing him, unless they both were. That was the other brother threatening him. So I assume after it came out, there wasn't much information on that. And I didn't see proof that he threatened him. And the stories all said he allegedly threatened him. So clearly that went nowhere.
Allegedly.
But the judge decided in August of that year that the tapes were admissible. An appeal on this ruling delayed the case for 2 full years until the California Supreme Court ruled in August 1992 that the tape explicitly discussing the murder was not admissible, but the other tapes were. And I'm like, why? Explain this to me.
Yeah.
No. That ruling freed them up to proceed with murder charges, and they were to be tried separately. The police and prosecution went full speed ahead with accusations of murder for money, and that's where the focus remained. But with the official murder charges, the brothers threw out surprising accusations. They said they killed their parents after years of abuse, physical by both parents, sexual by their father, though they stated their mother was aware of the sexual abuse and looked the other way. They claimed they feared for their lives, that there was violence that was purposeful on their father's part and sloppy on their mother's part due to her abusing substances and being mentally unstable. 2 of their cousins backed them up, stating that they'd each been approached by one of the brothers when they were young. Andy Cano said Eric came to him at age 13 and asked if Andy's dad massaged his penis too, because Jose did. And he wanted to know if this was normal because it didn't feel right to him. Diane Vandermolen was 16 when she stayed at the Menendez home. That night, 8-year-old Lyle came to her room scared and told her he didn't want to be in his room because his dad touched his penis and made him touch his in turn. She actually went to the mother, Kitty, and told her what the son had said. And Kitty shut her down, saying Jose would never do that. Lyle was a liar. Went no further than that. Cousin didn't know what to do. I mean, she's 16. While some family members stoically defended Jose and Kitty, saying there's absolutely no way they would have done anything wrong to the boys, and they clearly just wanted their parents' money, there were other family members who believed the boys, other than just these cousins. Alan Anderson was another cousin who testified on their behalf, though it caused tension between he and his father, who was on the side of the parents. While the boys didn't tell him as directly as the other cousins, he did say they told him they had to shower with their dad after tennis games. And when he stayed at the house 3 summers in a row, Kitty told him he wasn't allowed to go down the hall when Jose was in one of the boys' rooms. No one was allowed down there if Jose was in one of the rooms, and Alan was the only one who was not the only one who knew this rule. This was a rule. When Jose and the boys are down there, you can't go down there. Well, here's why people wanted to go down there, because you're like, okay, that's where the bathroom was. So, but the bedrooms and the bathroom are all up this hall. Because the one cousin, this Alan, had to go down into the basement to use like the weird basement bathroom, and he hated that, right? So this is why this stuck out for him. When Alan was there after tennis games, the boys would run from the bathroom to their rooms and lock themselves in, and then they would just be, there was no talking to their cousins anymore that day, right? So it was very weird. Alan's dad, Brian Anderson, testified for the prosecution. His argument was that he had attended tennis tournaments just before the killings, and that Jose and Kitty were excited and eagerly complimentary when Eric won. When Eric lost the tournament, he was rude to his father when the man tried to talk to him, telling him to shut up. Eric said he told his father to shut up after he said, "You played like an ass." When Brian was asked if that was true, he said he couldn't remember anything about that. So, and I was like, so what though? Somehow his parents supporting him at a tennis match means that they couldn't be abusive behind closed doors. Did he think that they would beat them at the tennis tournament? Like, what the fuck? It's the stupidest argument against it.
Mm-hmm.
The prosecution tried to argue that the allegations of sexual abuse weren't relevant. The defense was able to cite a law having to do with female victims being allowed to present evidence concerning abuse and the psychological impacts. So it was allowed in this case. The defense actually had a photo of both boys' genitals that they said was taken by their father. The trial was a circus and was aired on Court TV in 1993. Even with the allegations, the prosecution continued pushing the money angle. The brothers claimed they didn't think they were getting an inheritance, so they couldn't have done it for the money. The deeply troubling part, looking back, was that during this time period, there was massive denial that men could be sexually assaulted or raped. This is what I saw over and over again with this on commentary on this. And really at this point in the early 90s, rape against women wasn't taken all that seriously, because the things like the case they cited earlier about her being allowed to introduce assault, right? That was new. That was fairly recent when that happened. So this was all still being forged. And there were some strides being made, but again, for women, nothing to do with men being assaulted. And even now, there are many people who argue to the death that it's impossible to rape a man. But just as we pointed out about women, that our bodies have automatic responses, so do males. And they absolutely fucking can be raped, just so I make my stance abundantly clear, because this pisses me off. Disgustingly, one of the prosecutors, Pam Bosanich, stated that, quote, "Men cannot be raped because they lack the necessary equipment to be raped." What the fuck does that mean? What
know.
Equipment? So you can only be raped if you have a vagina, I assume is what was being said. I don't know. On the stand, it came out that they'd used a friend's ID for the boys to purchase the 2 shotguns and ammunition a couple days before the murder. They said they'd only confessed the sexual abuse to each other a few weeks before the night of the murders, and that they then confronted their parents together. Their father, they said, had threatened to kill them if they told anyone. And on August 20th, 1989, they had again confronted their parents. But this time their father had closed the door to the den.
Wait. They were 18 and 21 years old before they knew that each other was also being sexually assaulted? I thought they were being assaulted together.
The shower was together, but individually he would go to their rooms. So they would shower together, and I don't know what happened in the showers. I would have had to go read the court documents because it wasn't anywhere. But other than that, they knew that part. But the parts where he was touching them, it sounds like, were one-on-one, and he had told them repeatedly not to tell each other. And I do have a letter that mentions it later on, too, that I'll get to. But yeah, they hadn't really talked to each other. And I imagine that there's a part of it that didn't understand, because, again, back then, it's not like this stuff was available for that. They couldn't just go online and hear other people's stories and say, this is wrong.
Well, and you hear about that type of stuff all the time, like older sisters thinking, okay, if I let this keep happening, then he won't go to my younger sister. So you could see that.
That's where my mind went.
Right. And that's probably a chunk of it. Like, okay, I'm going to protect my brother. And they were probably both protecting each other, because it sounds like they were really close.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they would have split up instead of getting condos next door to each other. They had the money to do whatever they wanted.
And we don't know what the dad was telling them.
Right.
And he may have been telling them, if you do this, I won't do it to your brother.
Right.
Ugh.
So that day, though, when they confronted him again, the dad went and shut the door to the den, and they said that made them fear for their lives. So I didn't fully comprehend. I kind of get it, but I was like, but you were able to go out, because they got out and ran to their car, and that's where the guns were. And they said at that time they loaded them, and they went back inside. And one of them said as soon as he stepped in, he just started shooting into the den. He just started shooting. The fact they had purchased the guns and ammo in advance indicated premeditation, making their argument that they had just snapped hard to buy.
Yeah.
On the other hand, relatives had said their massive spending after the deaths wasn't out of the ordinary, like I already said. So they'd had plenty of access to money, indicating no need to kill to get this money. Like they could have done that. And they were old enough to figure out how to move out, unless they weren't being allowed to, unless there was something being held over their heads, unless, they couldn't, maybe it was, no, you can't have your birth certificates and this and that you knew. Who knows? I have no idea. The jury's deadlocked in both trials, resulting in mistrials. So I'm willing to bet that a part of that was because there were biases on those juries, and that there were some of them going, well, duh, they were absolutely sexually assaulted, and others going, that's impossible. Here they deadlock. Either way, the brothers had to go through it all again. Only this time they were being tried together, and the judge would only allow extremely limited testimony having anything to do with sexual abuse. He actually gagged it. Of those who had testified for the brothers in the first trials, only their cousin Kano was allowed to testify in the second trial. That meant 30 witnesses for the defense were excluded. That's how many people were backing their shit up.
How could the judge do that? I mean, what was the reasoning?
Who was the judge? Did it say?
Oh, I'm going to name him.
Because I would love to hear about other court cases that he has served on.
Right?
That he is fucked up beyond all recognition?
Yeah, probably ones that are extremely not helpful for women that were assaulted in any way.
Right. Oh yeah, you bet. The argument from the prosecution was that battered women syndrome, which was basically the extent of their defense, right, did not apply to males. The judge agreed and cited case law backing this up. When manslaughter was brought up, this judge, and here's his name, Stanley Weisberg, and as I wrote here, who I think was an absolute cocksucker, would not allow the jury to consider manslaughter. It was murder or nothing. He wouldn't even let him go for a lesser charge for these boys. He was absolute. I feel he came into this biased. There'd already been 2 trials for this. I think that he had his mind made up, and that's absolute bullshit for a judge. That's absolutely not how any of this should work. They were found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The jury stated they fully believed their motives were financial, because they weren't allowed to talk about sexual assault. Of course they believed it was financial. All you've got is all the experts and cops saying it's financial, and they're not allowed to talk about what was done to them. It's absurd. Both brothers were given life sentences for both charges with no possibility for parole and to be served consecutively. They were sent to separate prisons, but 22 years later, in 2018, they were finally placed together. It was the first they'd gone to see each other since 1996.
Oh my God.
When they were in the same facility but different units and could see each other across the prison yard. During the years, they had been allowed to keep touch by snail mail and had even played chess via mail by sending the next move in each letter. They both cried as they hugged each other at their eventual reunion. They're currently allowed to see each other at meals and in the exercise yard. And by the way, they're in their 50s. Of course, the brothers have appealed, but their petitions have been repeatedly denied. But the story isn't over yet. In 2023, new evidence came to light. First, Roy Rosello, a member of the Puerto Rican boy band Menudo, openly admitted that he had been sexually assaulted repeatedly and then raped by Jose. His understanding was that he had been handed over to Jose to solidify a deal between Menudo and RCA at the time. What's that?
No, go ahead, because I'm pretty sure I think I saw something about this. So it's not just him, right? There's a couple that have come forward.
That's what I kind of heard, but all I found was really him, and also they're accusing their manager at the time was also assaulting these boys. So that may be more what you've heard about. So he was 14 at the time of the rape, but 13 when this started. For folks who aren't familiar with Menudo, they're a boy band made up of boys younger than 16. And it was an ongoing thing for decades. They started in 1977, but gained popularity in the US in the 80s. Once a boy reached 16 years old, he was forced out as they wanted the higher voices of younger boys.
Right. Ricky Martin.
Yep, exactly. Yep. The original producer who formed the band, Edgardo Diaz, has also been accused of sexual abuse, like I said. And so Ricky Martin joined, he was 12 and he joined in 1984. They were named after some issues and they faded away. There was like, oh, the kids are on drugs. There was this whole explosion that happened, I think, somewhere in the 90s. I don't remember for sure because I was just scanning through. There's a lot of history to Menudo, so I was just scanning through her stuff. But in 2022, Mario Lopez held auditions and he reformed Menudo. So Menudo is back. I hope it's much healthier. And I would be afraid as a male to like start that in case accusations came. But okay, back to the Menendez brothers. I just wanted to give a little background there. There was additional new evidence that helped the brothers file for a new trial last May. Their cousin, Andy Cano, who had testified in all 3 trials, died years ago in the early 2000s, and his mother had basically sealed his room up when it happened. And she finally went through his things in 2018 and discovered a letter that had been sent to him by Eric 8 months before the murders occurred. The letter actually stated the sexual abuse was still happening at their adult ages, even though it started when they were super young. And this was a surprise to people. So apparently that didn't really come up. So I don't know if they were embarrassed and trying to hide that part, but willing to put the other part out. The letter said, quote, "I've been trying to avoid Dad. It's still happening, Andy, but it's worse for me now." And quote, "I never know when it's going to happen and it's driving me crazy. Every night I stay up thinking he might come in. I need to put it out of my mind. I know what you said before, but I'm afraid. You just don't know Dad like I do. He's crazy. He warned me 100 times about telling anyone, especially Lyle. Am I a serious wimpus? I don't know. I'll make it through this. I can handle it, Andy. I need to stop thinking about it." End quote.
That was the younger one? That was Eric?
So Eric is I think he's the older one. Dude. Yeah. No, Eric was the younger one.
So he was 17 to 18 at the time when he wrote that.
Yeah. Yeah. Legal experts are divided on whether they have a chance to get out or reduce their sentences because at least 2 people came forward during the original trials to claim the brothers had asked them to lie for them. Like one of them had asked the girlfriend to say that their father had abused her. The doubt has been cast on others who defended them. The experts state that the evidence is compelling, but might not be enough to force any sort of action. It's very hard after this long a time to get something looked at again. They do think that if they were to get a retrial, they likely would not be convicted of murder. It's getting that retrial that's especially hard 30 years down the line. Both brothers did get married while in prison. In fact, one was married. She thought he was cheating on her. They got a divorce. He got remarried. I'll never understand women. Like,
dude, I can't even get a fucking date. What is up?
Because if you go to prison, though, you'll find Gypsy Rose also met her husband while she was in prison because he was writing her letters.
Maybe I just need to pretend like I'm in prison, put myself out there and just see what comes for me.
There you go. Find one of those websites where people find it and like here's this Cameron chick right here.
Or you need to start writing letters to men in prison.
Oh.
No, I don't want to marry a prisoner. I want somebody to come and marry me and get me out.
Eric works with terminally ill inmates and leads classes on religion. They both work toward prison reform and help those who have suffered sexual abuse as children. They have dealt with people wanting to fight them as they're both famous, right? Like this was imagine the ages they went in, they would have probably been really great targets. And especially like talking about the sexual assault and stuff like that. It was all out there. But they've been model prisoners for the most part. One of them hasn't gotten into any major trouble. One of them has had 2 in all these years, like major incidents or something on his record. So this is why they kept petitioning basically to be put in the same place. And it took this long. I don't have an update on how this is going for them yet. So I don't think there's been no retrial. I also did not find that it had been turned down yet. So it seems like it's still somewhere in the bureaucratic works.
It's churning through the system.
Yes. Those defending them want the evidence heard so at least the world understands why they did what they did, even if they can't get out of prison. The narrative at the time of the trials was that they were spoiled, greedy creeps who were willing to kill to keep that money, but at no point has it been shown they feared losing that access to the money. And here's my thing, the way they killed them, if you're just trying to get money from your parents, you wait till they're sleeping. Like that's what you see over and over again is some sort of very easy, well, not easy, but it's a lot different shooting somebody in the back when they're sleeping or something like that than it is to walk in when they're fully awake. And the fact that the mother, the dad, it was like the head from the back, and the mother, it was the face and the torso, because honestly, you would feel like there's something worse to being
anger, rage.
Yes,
infused.
that's exactly what it says to me, is that she was letting this happen. Anger. She should have been protecting them, right? And so I can see why she was shot the way she was. And anyway, at no point was it shown they feared losing access to the money to make that make sense. They weren't about to be cut off. There was nothing like that. The family was obviously very close and very large, and nobody had heard that he was cutting them off. So personally, just from what I've read into it, I think they were done a severe injustice because of their gender in relation to sexual assault allegations. I believe that the twisted bias that males can't be raped took away their chances at a real life, and the type of understanding Gypsy Rose was shown by courts in my last story. I also believe their father was charming enough that people couldn't see him having committed his crimes, and that his position of power put him on a pedestal.
Well, it's only been like in the last 5 years that all of a sudden all of these big wig Hollywood,
Weinstein.
All of a sudden, oh my God, they've been creeps the entire time. Like it's now all of a sudden it's starting to be acceptable to accept the fact that they are these people, when people with power have been assholes all along, right?
Right. Scumbags who abuse power over and over and fucking over again. But the timing that this happened, everything was against these boys. Like nothing they were going to say was going to be believed because society just didn't see it. Right. It just wasn't reasonable to them. So yeah, I know there will always be people who don't believe their allegations. There are still relatives who don't. I mean, they have relatives who are still fully supportive of them and back them. There are relatives who didn't believe it at first who came around and were like, fuck, this is awful. And I hate knowing this about like my brother or whatever.
Right.
So, but there will always be people that don't believe them. But I can hope that the two who in January 2024 were 56 and 53 will get another chance to have a complete and fair trial. And I understand why Gypsy Rose's freedom has brought out cries of what about the Menendez brothers now, right? Because they absolutely shouldn't still be in prison. Did they do wrong? Yes. Were they old enough that they could have found another way to get out? Yeah. But at the same time, I welcome anybody who thinks that they absolutely should have made that other choice to be in the same situation and see what that does to you, because it was happening to them from young childhood all the way up to this point. Like,
yeah, we're talking years and years and years of abuse, of sexual abuse at the hands of their parents, of their father.
Of the people they were supposed to trust.
Yeah.
Well, and the mother was allowing it. So yeah, I'm just like, actually reading this just pissed me off so much. It's such an injustice. So my sources were LA Times, Wikipedia, ABC, Biography, and CNN. But yeah, absolutely. This should be getting looked at again, and they should be getting out.
Definitely.
So gross.
I agree. The only thing I have a problem with is the premeditation.
Yes.
And it's not even that I have a problem with the fact that they did it. It's just like that. You can't deny that. You can't
deny. You can't say this was a sudden thing and we just weren't thinking. You found out from each other what was going on. And then you planned this at some point and you went and you got ammo.
Yeah.
And guns and whatever it was that you intended to do with that, you intended to have that as a possibility. So, and I think that's the problem, is that premeditation means murder. It doesn't mean manslaughter, if I'm remembering right. So yeah, but at the same time, there's different sentences they could have gotten. At the very least, it shouldn't have been life with no parole for this, because they weren't going to go kill. The whole point in prison is supposed to be to rehab you. And if you will always be a danger to society, that should be looked at differently. But these two men aren't going to get out and go kill somebody.
No.
They're not going to ever do that probably. Although now they've been in prison all their lives. Who knows what it's done to them? But like, it's just, yeah.
Yeah.
The court system just continued their abuse is what it did. The legal system abused them just like their parents had. So there we go. I've done the Menendez brothers. Now I said I would in the last episode. Now I'm just mad again because Gypsy Rose's situation sucked too.
Oh yeah.
But with her, I honestly don't think there were a lot of ways she could have gotten away. Whereas they could have probably figured out how to steal some money.
They could have, but you got to think about it, man. Like if that's the lifestyle that you have lived your whole life in and stuff, I mean, I have to imagine that like just walking away is just, I mean, like that is infallible, not infallible, inconceivable. It is inconceivable to walk away. I don't know why my brain is not functioning. To walk away from that. So like, I mean, his letter to his cousin, you know, that whole like, I can put up with this, I can put up with it. Like I could see not knowing. It's just like they say about, you know, a lot of women that are abused. Why don't you walk away? Well, if you don't know where else you're going to go or how you're going to go or how you're going to get there, if you don't have family you can rely on or friends or whatever, then like it's really easy to sit there and say you could have done something different.
Right.
But I can imagine being very stranglehold in place.
Well, here's the thing, abusers, since you brought up, you know, like women who are being abused, for example, there are usually things put in place that make it hard for them to leave, you know? And so for all we know, because I couldn't find that. And again, I'm sure if I went and read all the fucking court documents from 3 different trials, I could find stuff, but I was not willing to put that much time into it. I'm sure that there was something that made them feel like their hands were tied, basically.
You know, and there's also something, and not just this case, but I mean, I'm sure there are a list of cases that you would probably way more adept at grabbing than I would. But, you know, anytime that a case requires 2 or more trials to freaking like come to a conclusion, like I feel like every time it becomes even more sketchy, right? Like the judge did all those things like for the second trial that unallowed all the things for the second trial that were allowed in the first trial. Like it just seems like when you hear about hung juries and stuff and you hear about second cases coming up, almost always it's kind of like there's something else going on. There's an agenda going on underneath the fabric that is all of a sudden has completely twisted the justice system and people are using it for their own purposes.
Absolutely. Well, and the other thing was that second judge didn't allow the cameras in the court. So the country and whoever else had heard all of this stuff. And he was like, nope, no cameras are allowed in here. So that second trial got very little coverage. Suddenly, I think that judge saw it and he was irritated by all the attention they got. He was irritated that it was all played out like that. And he was like, that's not going to happen in my court. So,
well, there was just a case recently where the judge is resigning because they found that the judge was during a murder trial was texting.
Oh my God.
And making fun of, I can't remember if it was the defense or the prosecution, but was like on text mocking the attorneys and sending emojis.
So you're saying he'll be the next Supreme Court judge?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
It seems like misbehavior is what gets you in there now.
It didn't say that he had a sugar daddy, you know, that he was actually selling his ass, but
yeah. Wow.
And actually, I think it was a woman. But I just thought...
It was a female judge?
Yeah. Can you imagine being a judge? You're presiding over this trial and you're supposed to be A, paying attention and B, making sure shit goes the way it's supposed to go. And you're texting.
Right.
Mocking them.
And anytime there needs to be a way to monitor for implicit bias. Like my own family has been hit with that in the last 2 years. And there's implicit bias. It's obvious. And that is supposed to be... Judges are human, so there will always be bringing their own.
But that's why there's supposed to be a whole like balance and check system.
Exactly, and that's why it's supposed to meet with case law, and that's why it's supposed to hit this established shit. But the thing is, I was looking at how many times they tried to petition, like the do their appeals, and just nope, they weren't even considered.
Yeah.
So they've just been running into a wall over and over and over again, and it's bullshit. So I have basically zero faith in our justice system at this point at all, period. I don't, at this point, I've reached the point where if somebody gets convicted, I'm like, did they really do it? Like, I just don't know. Seems like you get off if you really did it, and you get convicted if you didn't do it. And it just depends on who can afford of a public opinion.
Who can afford the better lawyer?
Yeah.
Well, and I also feel like when you're looking at something that happened, decades ago, there's almost like a collective paralysis associated with righting a wrong because righting the wrong is going to open up so many more cans of worms than just letting them sit and suffer.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, that's horrible, horrible, horrible thing to say, but like, I feel like that happens a lot in our judicial system.
Well, yeah. If they overthrew this, would they have the basis to go back and look at other convictions this judge presided over?
And similar ones for men who were victims.
Yes.
And the thing is, they weren't men when they were victims; they were children. But in them saying, "Well, a man can't have battered woman syndrome." Why? Because woman's in the name, then it should be battered persons. Like like.
Well, and that is a curious question, right? Like, is there any kind of like research out there or whatever that shows all of the cases that tried to come forward, a male claiming to have been sexually assaulted and that led to, other actions. And all of those had been like, how many, not just from that judge, how many cases in general could possibly open, right? You have men in if there was a man just recently released, I can't remember, but it was like for something like a burglary or something like that. Like, and it turned with I think a murder associated with it. And like, they just 25 years later or whatever, figured out the DNA wasn't his, right? Or whatever. Mm-hmm. So they just let him out. But like, I think that especially with something with this kind of visibility, like I honestly think a lot of the times the reason why nothing is done is because it's just paralysis associated with what else will this open up? What else will this unravel?
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing.
Don't mess with anything.
That's what we'd like to see is that that's what should be happening then in the justice system, though, is if this big case, it will make a difference. And what you say about paralysis makes sense, because if this gets taken care of, then all of these families who have been through this, right, all of the people who've been through something similar might be able to move forward with it. And the question is, how much of that are they purposely going to try and suppress? Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Boo.
That'd be interesting to research, to look to see, like if somebody, I mean, you got to figure there's got to be like a college student, a political science college student, or a pre-laws college student, or something somewhere that like has a running list of if this one case got overturned, it would unravel all of these other ones. And
that's what they need, is somebody who is driven and determined to see this specific thing be blown wide open, right? And somebody needs to step up and do that, who's pursuing that. So I guess it's time for us to wrap it up. So Kameron, tell people where they can find you, what your newest upcoming release is. Give out the goods.
Okay. You can find me everywhere. Kameron Claire, just Google it. I'm literally everywhere. If she's got pink hair, it's me. Yeah, I'm everywhere. I have like 50, I think right now I have 50 titles out wide. And my last one, I have one coming out on Tuesday called Mind to Protect. And, and that'll be the second to the last in the series. The last one will come out mid-March. And then I have a seal book that's like crossed over in between these that comes out March 1st. And I'll be in Readers Take Denver in April.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
That's it.
Great.
Perfect.
And I guess I gotta pimp some shit for myself too.
Yes, you do.
Because I haven't. So I've been on the Functional Nerds podcast recently, if people want to look that up, and Ye Old Crime podcast just released yesterday. It's a super short, like 15-minute. I had to guess Victorian slang. One of them, I was like, I cannot respond what I feel like that is. It would be inappropriate. So go ahead and just tell me. Like, I can't guess. I guessed the first one. I didn't guess the second one.
What was it? What
Well, I'm not going to tell you. You got to listen to the 15-minute podcast. Pimping me, I got to pimp her.
Okay. I did hear you on Functional Nerds.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you were very good.
Always fun with the Patrick. And my book, Mythstalker Wendigo Nights, my debut novel, urban fantasy, is coming out March 26th. And it is up for pre-order a lot of places. The paperback hasn't hit Amazon yet.
Do you have a UBL yet for it?
Yeah, I actually have a post scheduled out with the UBL. I wanted to wait until I could add some more shit to it. So got it. It's out there. And I do, let's see. No, my giveaway will be closed by then. Damn. Sorry. All right, pimp it. So, all right. Thank you for coming on, Kameron.
Thanks. I had fun.
Good to see you.
Thanks. It was good to see you too.
And thank you to everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you later.
Next month.
That's right. Bye.
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 Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back with more shenanigans.